military court in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has sentenced a rebel leader to life in prison for mass rape and crimes against humanity. Ntabo Ntaberi was jailed at the end of a 2-year trial which saw 178 victims testify. Also known as Cheka, Ntaberi surrendered to the UN mission in the DR Congo in July 2017 after being on the run for nearly 6 years. He was one of the leaders of a militia group known as the Nduma Defense of Congo, which operated in the restive North Kivu province. Analyst and Channel Africa producer Nixon Katembo is in Zoom to share more on this story. Thanks so much indeed. Always good to talk to you. What does this trial and eventual sentencing mean? Is it significant?
Well, good evening to you, Peter, and good evening to the viewer at home. I think this trial is just a drop in the ocean, but a big step forward in beginning to understand the atrocities and much of the heinous crimes that have been committed in the Democratic Republic of Congo by various militia. And I say that cognizant of the fact that there are more than 140 militia operating in that region, and trying Ntabo Ntaberi Cheka is one part of a bit of what is happening in the DRC. However, coming to Cheka himself, you would understand he forms part of the militia that you earlier said, the NDC, of which is still operating today under new command led by Gidoshi Mirai Mwisa, who operates in the territory of Walikale, Masisi, and Ruchuru in the North Kivu province. So, having formed that rebel group, which he was part of the founding member, the movement itself still operates and still, committing atrocities against the civilian in that part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, especially the maiming of children, the raping of women, including the forced labor in terms of mineral exploitations, because this is the area where much of the coltan that is exploited in the DRC. And whether this trial is, significant, I would say no, but it's a step forward.
Remind us why Ntaberi Cheka handed himself in 2017.
Ntaberi Cheka handed himself because there has been a strife within his own rebel movement, is to say his own militia group. You would recall that he first broke away from the NDC Renove and formed what they call the Mai Mai Cheka, and they moved from Walikale, Ruchuru, up to going to the south of the Lubero territory, far in the north of the northern Kivu province. His movement also extended up towards the Ituri, and you would see, if you look at the map of the DRC, mostly part of the east, wherever he passed, they left a trail of killing, they left a trail of destruction. However, coming to the group that still operates under a new command, in this case Gidoshi Mirai, you would recall that just recently they changed the name to become NDC Renove, meaning a renewed NDC. And within that political, also that same movement, there was different factions that were fighting. And you would recall that just a couple of months ago, we talked about how most of those NDC Renove rebels, led by another faction, surrendered to the Congolese government. And I remember asking questions, whether is this a positive sign that they are going to give up arms? My answer was very skeptical as it is today, that indeed you might have Cheka Ntabo Ntaberi to be sentenced to today, but the mastermind and his accomplice are still running amok and committing atrocity against civilians in the DRC.
So this NDC Renovate, do they continue to do the mass rapes that that this group was accused of and he was found guilty of when he was in charge of the grouping?
The modus of operandi still remain the same, Peter. They still maiming children, they still raping women, they still killing civilians. I mean, just about a week ago, there were about 29 local business people who were coming from Bukavu that were rounded up and killed by machetes by the very same NDC Renove led by Gidoshi Mirai, who, by the way, is also on the list of the United Nations and also sought after by the DRC government. But it's interesting to note that this very same group is supported by some of the high-ranking officials in the military, in the Congolese government, and here I mean by the DRC army, and mostly of them supported also by foreign powers, including Rwanda, which is always fingered in the United Nations reports, including Human Rights Watch reports, saying that they have been the source of, supplying them arms with ammunition. And you'd recall just recently, after those factions fought and the surrender of this another group, they came out and said that even the new military fatigues that we get actually come from officers of the DRC army. So that tells you how much the problem is wide. But coming to the issues of atrocity, they round up children in the village, young boys, young women, and enslave them. In fact, they use them as transporters for whatever movement that they make, including forcing them into different artisanal mining, where they get their much needed resources to fund their war and their crimes in terms of buying ammunition. And the conduit for that is always just across the DRC border in Rwanda, where all the minerals that are extracted illegally through blood of the Congolese people end up, and from there it end in the international markets.
Why are these rebel groups out of the reach of federal forces from Kinshasa? You've mentioned that some of them are complicit, but why is it that these rebel groups almost are allowed to roam free, causing chaos and mayhem?
Well, they are causing chaos and mayhem because they have their complicity in the government in Kinshasa. And this is by design, because much of the DRC army is a conglomerate of different armed groups that came together to form the current government forces. And you'd see that from different successive rebellions that have happened in the DRC since the toppling of Mobutu Sese Seko in 1996, up until today, there has been talks about people forming rebel groups and then joining government with their ranks, coming straight away from the bush. And most of these rebel groups have never totally surrendered, neither did some. Some surrendered to government and form part of the government while they still have armed cache in the forest where they left. That has been the case with the CNDP, that has been the case with the RCD Goma, that has been the case with the M23 of recent, and that's still the case. That's why you have the connections between those militia group operating in the Eastern DRC with the army officers who are in government, but in Rio says they still have connections with their friends who are militia in the DRC. The case in point is the recent one where a colonel called Makanika, who was the colonel of the DRC army, left the DRC army to join other militia groups in South Kivu called the Ngumino. And now, currently, they are terrorizing people there. They are killing civilians there under the pretext, quote unquote, they are protecting Banyamulenge civilians who are hurting. But in Rio says, this is an army officer who now is part of the militia group, and that has been the modus of operandi in perpetrating the crimes and perpetrating violence in Eastern Congo.
We know that there's growing tension between former President Kabila and the current President Kedi. How is this affecting the army and the running of the army? Who are they loyal to, or are they a force unto themselves?
Well, the loyalty of the army constitutionally is to the current government. But if you look at the history of that army structures, the one who tried to bring some sense of sanity within the army is the former President Joseph Kabila. And that's why it explained that many of the army officers are still loyal to him, owing to their history in the bushes, in the trenches during the first rebellion in 1996. And that's why you see Kabila, the former president, Joseph, still hold the sway on the army, still hold the sway in parliament, he still hold the sway in the political process in the country. And the current political bickering between the president and the immediate former president is based on those various loyalties, be it political, be it on the military front, and be it on what has been built over the years during the 18 years of power of Kabila at the helm of the DRC state. So I don't see this ending now unless there is a real reform within the security apparatus of the DRC, completely overhaul of the structure, including more and above building a capable military force, building a capable military intelligence, because it's upon the military intelligence information that they are able to gather much needed information that then can be supplied to the high chain of command, and therefore design a plan to protect the country. Other than that, if those institutions are not built to serve the people of the DRC, but rather they build on the basis of who is in leadership, then the DRC will continue to have a problem.
And we'll continue to see what's happening in the east of the country. And I suppose that takes us back to where we started, that this development, the sentencing to life in prison of this former warlord is, as you put it, a drop in the ocean, but at least it's a step. Nixon, Katembo, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, mon frère. À bientôt.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
All right, and that's where we will leave that